Paris. Restaurants and romance, empire and opera, fun, surprising experiences at every one of the more than 300 stops on the metro. My name is Lisa. I'm a writer and tour guide. I carry a Canadian passport, but all we'll need is a ticket for the metro system as I show you historic, inspirational, endlessly fabulous Paris. I'd like to share my love for this spectacular city with you, one stop after the next, by way of the exciting Paris metro system. So grab your French phrasebook and put on your walking shoes. We're going to Paris. Next stop, Les Halles. Today, we're at metro station Les Halles in central Paris. We'll discover the story of the famous Les Halles market. We'll visit the underground city that's replaced it today. We'll meet a few little monsters, some local merchants, and visit historic and religious sites. We'll also take this opportunity to enjoy a meal at a great restaurant. Les Halles is an area that has experienced major changes over its history, and it is still evolving. This is Les Halles, the busiest metro station in the city. And one of the reasons it's so busy is because Les Halles is where a number of suburban trains come into Paris. Now, it's actually appropriate that there are a lot of tunnels deep underground in Les Halles because for centuries, this was the belly of Paris. And the merchants who sold food here needed deep basements to keep their produce cool. Far underground in Les Halles is where the cheeses ripened, where meat was hung in the days before refrigeration, and where fruit was kept while it ripened as well. Now these days, Les Halles is going through another transformation, so let's see how it's doing. Les Halles is in the center of Paris. All roads from other French provinces converge right here, just a stone's throw from the important river Seine. When you're at metro stop Les Halles, you're within walking distance to fantastic tourist attractions like Ile de la Cité and Notre-Dame de Paris, the Tuileries and the Louvre, the Hôtel de Ville and the futuristic Centre Georges Pompidou. Les Halles is one of this city's busiest neighborhoods. 300,000 people walk through its tangle of pedestrian streets every day. The Forum des Halles mall hosts about 150,000 visitors and shoppers every day, partly because of the busy transit hub, Châtelet-Les Halles, which is the busiest in Europe. 750,000 passengers come through here every single day. Les Halles has an important place in Paris history. In the early 12th century, the French king Louis the Fat established the market here near the Seine, but on dry land the river couldn't flood. The central location allowed merchants to sell goods coming from all over France. In the 19th century, Napoleon III modernized the market. In 1851, he commissioned architect Victor Baltard to build bold iron and glass structures. The market was visited by everyone and even inspired writer Émile Zola to pen one of his greatest novels. Zola's book, Le Ventre de Paris, or The Belly of Paris, is set in Les Halles and beautifully describes working-class life in 19th century Paris. Unfortunately, the Baltard Pavilion survived only a single century. By the 1960s, traffic congestion, garbage, and rats in the increasingly crowded heart of the city became a serious problem. The government realized Les Halles Market could no longer work within the growing city, and urban planners foresaw this central site as a possible main hub for modern transit. So in 1969, the market moved to Rungis, an area south of Paris near the Orly airport. And in 1970, the market's era came to an end when the Baltard pavilions were demolished. For a few years after, there was a huge hole at the site, which was actually used by a film shoot wanting a western desert location. The pit eventually became the new underground transit station, but this ugly construction site was a gaping wound in the heart of the city for most of the 1970s. 1977, the Châtelet-Les Halles station was opened. It connected 3 lines of the RER commuter train, 5 subway lines, and 18 bus lines. This means you can get from the center of the city out to Charles de Gaulle Airport in just 28 minutes. Once the train and subway station was functional, work continued to fill the hole that was disfiguring this famous neighborhood. In 1979, the underground shopping mall, Le Forum des Halles, opened. People using the Châtelet-Les Halles metro station soon began to appreciate the 170 shops in this huge 4-floor mall. Fnac is the largest distributor of cultural products in France, from books and music to tickets for every show going on in Paris. There are over 100 Fnacs across the country, and if you need maps, travel guides, or maybe a phone charger or computer equipment, this is the place to visit. La Rue du Cinéma, or Cinema Street, is an area in the mall dedicated to the art of motion pictures. If you're a movie fan, make sure to visit the Forum des Images. Established in 1988, this is the audiovisual memory for the city of Paris, where you can view an extraordinary collection of over 7,000 films made in the city. The Forum des Images also has 5 theaters where enthusiasts attend screenings, discussions, debates, and festivals. Its eclectic programming is an inexpensive delight for moviegoers of all ages. There's even programming here for children as young as 18 months. And if you want to see a blockbuster, you can also find it in Les Halles. The UGC Ciné-Cité is a 30-theater complex. And here, American movies aren't dubbed into French, but simply subtitled. But Les Halles is not just about underground activities. When the work was completed in the late 1970s, the Châtelet-Les Halles station and the mall were covered by a massive urban park that's almost 8 football fields in size. After more than a decade of noise and dust, this beautiful green space was much appreciated. In the early 1980s, construction was finally finished and pedestrians were able to stroll amongst the trellis-covered greenery around the Forum des Halles. These metal umbrellas were a nostalgic reference to Victor Baltard's 19th century pavilions. But unfortunately, the umbrella structures have weathered badly and they're now being demolished. So this urban landscape is now under construction once again. Les Halles has gone through so many incarnations, from simple 12th century market stalls to the 20th century mall to today.
New Grand Projet Paris is yet again tearing itself up in the center of the city and rebuilding itself in a more modern and interesting way. And soon Les Halles is going to look so much better.
Paris has embarked on a massive urban planning, architectural design, and renovation project to bring Les Halles into the 21st century. All these cranes and construction are needed to modernize Les Halles, to adapt its aging structures to new safety standards. Because of the large numbers of passengers traveling through the Châtelet-Les Halles station every day, the underground too must undergo a facelift. Architects working on the project plan to reorganize it to become more easily navigated. The new renovated Forum should feel more open, with a better connection from the lower levels up through the shopping center and into the neighborhood. The canopy is undoubtedly the most spectacular feature of the project. The huge glass structure covering the entrance of Les Halles on the Rue Pierre-Lescot will give shoppers plenty of natural light. Green spaces will be completely restored after all this construction, and there'll once again be lawns and playgrounds for children in the neighborhood. Completion is scheduled for 2016, but in the meantime, the metro station Les Halles and most of the surrounding shops are open for business. Les Halles is itself a monument to the history of Paris, but not always for the right reasons. Major transformations in the coming years will greatly improve the lives of the inhabitants and its visitors to make Les Halles an essential district for the French capital. Though Les Halles is being transformed, we can still find amazing history, like the mysterious La Fontaine des Innocents, right after this. We're in beautiful, busy, historic Paris. We're exploring the areas around its metro stations, and today, it's the heart of the city, Les Halles.
This is Rue Saint-Denis. This street runs alongside the old Les Halles food market, and for centuries it was the coronation route for the kings of France, coming in from their crowning out at the Basilica Saint-Denis. But even before the medieval kings of France marched along this road, it was a route for woolly mammoths traveling down to the Seine to drink water. While they were digging Metro Line 3, they actually came across the remains of a mammoth. Today, Saint-Denis has come out of a rather seedy phase because in the 20th century, this street was known for its peep shows and ladies of the night. Nowadays, it's known more for its trendy shops and inexpensive shoes and jackets, so it's a perfectly reasonable place to walk around, get a bit of the street vibe as you're wandering around the shopping areas of Les Halles.
These streets of Les Halles are really at the heart of Paris life and history. Every street tells a story. For example, this Rue de la Ferronnerie was the scene of a dramatic event.
Imagine that it's May 14th, 1610, and you are stuck in traffic on the narrow street behind me. And you're not far from the carriage of King Henry IV. All of a sudden, an assassin leaps out from behind a pillar, Ravaillac, holding a kitchen knife, and he breaks into the king's carriage and murders him right there. Today, there's a plaque on those arches commemorating the death of King Henry IV in 1610, and on the other side of those arches is the Fontaine des Innocents. Here we are in the Fontaine des Innocents. It used to be a vast cemetery, but in 1780 it had become so crowded with plague victims and other bodies that corpses were starting to leak into the basements of surrounding buildings. In 1780, the king decreed that the cemetery would be emptied. It was cleaned up, the fountain was made into this beautiful central place that's a popular meeting place even today, and it's now this beautiful square.
It's difficult to imagine how the square used to look. How did a cemetery end up here right beside Les Halles Market? But that was the reality in old Paris. The concept of hygiene was non-existent, people had no sewers, and this gigantic cemetery was conveniently located right in the middle of the city. The Cemetery of the Holy Innocents was the largest in Paris at the time, serving 22 parishes. Burials took place in a large common grave that held up to 1,500 bodies. When a pit was full, another was dug right next to it. The smell must have been unimaginable. When the mass graves began overflowing into the cellars of the neighboring houses, municipal authorities decided to move the cemetery. But what could they do with all those bones? The remains of 6 million Parisians were transferred into the catacombs of Paris. The macabre operation to transport the bones to their final resting place lasted 3 years. The trucks loaded with bones were covered with a black veil and accompanied by priests who chanted along the way. The catacombs of Paris don't only hold the remains of those from Holy Innocents Cemetery. Until 1813, they also held bones from all the other cemeteries in the capital. The catacombs are a fascinating, creepy place to visit. They've always been a popular attraction. But they aren't near Les Halles. If you want to experience the catacombs, or the Empire of the Dead, as it's known, you must follow the old path taken by those dark veiled trucks across the river and to the south at Metro d'Enfer Rochereau. But the dead aren't the only underground tenants of Paris. There are also living creatures, especially rats.
was infamous for its rats. The butcher pavilions especially attracted huge rats with horrible yellow teeth that were terrifying to the inhabitants. It's one of the reasons Les Halles Market was finally moved out to the suburbs. Now, this shop has been here since the late 1800s, and it's so famous it's even been featured in films, including an animated version in Ratatouille.
Even if the small rat character of Ratatouille was pleasant and fun, he was the exception. Rats have an understandably bad reputation, and people will go to great lengths to get rid of them. As disease carriers, rats were responsible for spreading plague in the 14th century. In Paris, that plague killed 800 people. In the space of 5 years, it also killed nearly 25 million throughout Europe. Opened in 1872, the Auroux House is a family business that specializes in the extermination of rats and other household pests. Here, Parisians can arm themselves against undesirables like cockroaches, mice, pigeons, and fleas. In fact, this was where a world-famous rat trap was first designed. The rats in the window are actual inhabitants of the district. They were trapped in the 1920s in the Baltard pavilions of Les Halles. It's a good advertisement to draw customers and tourists who come from all over the world to visit this unusual shop. There are many different kinds of traps, along with different kinds of poison, including one that's poetically called the devil pasta. It's quite different from the strychnine that used to be used. But rats have also been useful. During the siege of Paris by the Prussian army in 1870, the city was starving. No food supplies could get into the besieged city, and desperate Parisians began hunting rats to eat. Restaurants even served rat pâté and rat stew. Fortunately, the siege was a very brief episode in the history of Parisian gastronomy, but it was a good way to use up the rats. Despite their bad reputation, rats are really quite useful animals. They prevent pipes and drains from clogging, and it's estimated that they rid Paris of 800 tons of garbage every day. Moreover, some species are charming, easy to train pets. But enough about rodents. Let's look at the historic focus of Les Halles, hard work and food. Let's grab lunch at Chez Denise right after this. In delicious, delectable Paris, and we're discovering the neighborhood around Metro Les Halles, the real belly of Paris. In the early 20th century, around the great market halls, you could find many small restaurants preparing local food throughout the nearby streets. Today, if you want to experience that old working-class atmosphere of the neighborhood, simply stroll into the Tour de Montlhéry, or Chez Denise, at 5 Prouvaire Street.
Vous allez bien? Et vous? Ça va?
You'll be welcomed by the owner Denise, who makes sure every customer is treated like a king and leaves well fed. About the restaurant's name, La Tour de Montlhéry, or the Montlhéry Tower, dates from the time of Les Halles Market. It was here in Prouvaire Street where vegetable vendors from Montlhéry, a small town south of Paris, settled.
Voilà.
Denise was around in the 1960s for the last few years of Les Halles before the market moved to Rungis. During that time, her restaurant was frequented by laborers who unloaded trucks and transported the goods into the warehouses. They received part of their wages in kind, so they brought meat to the restaurant. In return, they paid only for French fries and wine. Because the work they did was so physical, these men had huge appetites. No surprise, the restaurants of Les Halles still serve immense portions to satisfy their traditional hungry clients. In the entrance, barrels of Brouilly welcome visitors. This wine comes from the vineyards in the Beaujolais region near Lyon. At least 10 barrels are served every week. At Chez Denise, tradition is important. The menu continues to serve rustic dishes like lamb and beans, salted beef, calf's head and pork chop. And it's always busy in the kitchen. They peel between 70 and 100 pounds of potatoes every day. Even if you've never been here before, you'll be seated near regulars, and the owner is here to make sure everyone gets along. Some of the restaurant's decor was actually provided by the police. The local police station has been located across the street from Chez Denise for many years, and police have been regulars of the restaurant for all that time. The hats adorning the bar are from police officers who have retired or died. Chez Denise has adopted the schedule of the old market of Les Halles, so you can eat here until 5 a.m. in the morning. No wonder a lot of theater and music performers drop by late at night to eat in Les Halles neighborhood. But be careful, Chez Denise isn't open on the weekends. Next, let's walk past the police station that helped decorate Chez Denise.
This is the Bourse de Commerce. It was built in 1885, and it replaced the Wheat Board building, which was at the far end of the Les Halles pavilions. Now today you can go inside and admire the unusual decor, but you can also use the exterior of this domed building as a really great landmark when you're navigating your way around Les Halles.
This circular building is the only building that survived waves of demolitions. Before being home to the commodity exchange, the building belonged to the Wheat Board. Built in the late 18th century, it was used to store wheat and other grains. The Wheat Board saw its activity gradually reduced over the years. In 1885, the Paris Chamber of Commerce established the commodity exchange here, taking over the building. They rebuilt the dome with glass and metal and covered the facades with stone. The portico on Rue du Louvre is topped by 3 allegorical figures who represent the city of Paris, abundance, and trade. The shiny new exchange was inaugurated in September 1889 as the place of business for many futures markets. It traded cereals, oils, sugar, alcohol, cocoa, coffee, and rubber, and continued operation until 1998, when the stock market became computerized. Today, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Paris has taken over the beautiful building to offer help to entrepreneurs. Thanks to the huge glass dome, the building is brightly lit, which helps us appreciate the magnificent fresco overlooking the circular foyer. Several renowned painters contributed to this work, which illustrates the history of trade between 5 continents. Separated by allegorical characters representing each of the cardinal points, the artists depicted Europe, Africa, and Asia, America, Russia, and the North. It's a masterpiece reflecting the spirit of the colonial era. Outside, a tall turret seems part of the exchange building, but it's really much older. This 31-meter stone pillar was part of the old Hôtel de Soissons, the palace of Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France in the 16th century. Catherine was very superstitious and trusted the stars to predict her future. The tower was built so that her personal astrologer, Cosimo de' Ruggieri, could stand at the top of the platform and read the skies. The skyline of Les Halles has lots of other towers too, for its churches, cathedrals, and chapels.
This is the Church of Saint-Eustache, which was started in 1532 and gradually continued to be constructed for about 100 years until there was no more money. Then the church got a facade thrown onto it just before the revolution in the 1700s. But even then, money ran out, so the turret right behind me isn't even finished. But the inside of Saint-Eustache is gorgeous, and the acoustics are some of the best in the whole city of Paris. And every Sunday, you can come to a free organ recital at 5 p.m.
Church of Saint-Eustache is one of the most impressive religious monuments of Paris. After Notre-Dame de Paris, it's the largest church in the city with an inspiring interior. For many years, it was the church of the kings of France because of its proximity to the Louvre, which was the royal palace until Louis XIV moved out to Versailles. Many baptisms and marriages have been celebrated within these walls. It's also the final resting place for political figures like Jean-Baptiste Colbert, the finance minister for Louis XIV. The Church of Saint-Eustache is an interesting mix of architecture. It's a Gothic structure with its flying buttresses, gargoyles, and Gothic arches, but the facade is classic and the interior is Renaissance. Of course, you'll see many statues, paintings, sculptures, and stained glass windows, all produced by renowned artists. The church's 24 chapels were once sponsored by different market unions and guilds. The Chapel of the Virgin is especially spectacular with 3 large frescoes by painter Thomas Couture. At the center of the chapel, there's a stunning statue of the Virgin and Child by sculptor Jean-Baptiste Pigalle. The Church of Saint-Eustache has long been the parish church for the workers of Les Halles who lived in the neighborhood. The church even has a chapel dedicated to charcuterie, or cured meats. The Pilgrims of Emmaus chapel contains the sculpture called Le départ des fruits et légumes au cœur de Paris, the departure of the fruits and vegetables from the heart of Paris, a poignant statement about the closing of the Great Les Halles wholesale market in the late 1960s. Thanks to its exceptional acoustics, Saint-Eustache is an ideal place for liturgical music concerts. The organ, with its 8,000 pipes, is one of the largest in France, making it very popular with musicians. Artists who have played here include the great French composers Franz Liszt and Hector Berlioz. The organ in the Saint-Eustache Church is equipped with 2 interconnected desks, allowing the organist to sit closer to the audience. After hosting the kings of France and the citizens of Paris from long ago, Saint-Eustache Church now welcomes the people who come to the Forum des Halles. It celebrates 2 masses each weekday as well as Sunday Mass, all accompanied by the choir and the organ. Apart from religious celebrations, the church is open to everyone to appreciate the unique architecture or simply to spend a quiet moment of contemplation. From music to snails. Have you ever tried this French speciality? I'll take you to the best place right after this. We're in gourmet, grandiose Paris, the culinary capital of the world. Around the Les Halles metro, let's discover the treasures of this gastronomic paradise.
This is the food market behind Saint-Eustache at the foot of Rue Montmartre. In 1969, when they tore down Les Halles, for a long time after that, this area had no food market, which is a terrible shame because this is the heart of food for Paris. This is the belly of Paris. So in 2005, the locals finally got the right to reopen a street food market here. And on Thursday afternoons and Sunday mornings, it's a great place to pick up a roast chicken, some fresh oysters, fabulous vegetables.
One of the simplest and nicest pleasures in life is going to the market to choose fresh produce for a good meal. But a good cook needs more than just vegetables. The de Hillerin boutique equips every cook from amateurs to professionals. This is where I like to find kitchen necessities, particularly specialized tools. This is an old-fashioned store. The aisles are narrow, the shelves are stocked to the brim, and the goods are hanging from the ceiling. There's an incredible selection here of pots and pans made from copper, an excellent conductor of heat. The shop makes its own brand of kitchen utensils and even sells used restaurant equipment. The The de Hillerin boutique has a family history that goes back to 1820, well before Napoleon III renovated the Les Halles markets. Eugène de Hillerin held workshops teaching maintenance and repair of kitchen equipment. The business was developed gradually, and eventually the shop took root here on the corner of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Coquillère. These days, a diverse clientele frequents the store, and the staff is happy to help. You might even see a chef from one of the world's most renowned restaurants. If you enjoy cooking and maybe need a unique cake mold, perhaps in the shape of the Eiffel Tower, don't hesitate to visit de Hillerin. A regular visitor to this shop is actually the chef of our next stop.
The Escargot has been here since 1875 in this wonderful historic interior that can't be changed because it's protected. And I can't wait to eat here because it was Charlie Chaplin's favorite place to eat in Paris. So let's give it a try. Bonsoir, monsieur. Merci beaucoup.
The Escargot Montorgueil restaurant is a veritable institution in Les Halles. With its Second Empire decor, artists and prominent personalities have always loved this place. Opened in 1832, this simple snail shop transformed into a restaurant in 1874. If you've never tried the famous snails, the Escargot Montorgueil is the best place to be initiated.
I am so pleased. I love snails, and I've never had snails this way. I've got 4 curried snails. I have 4 snails in Roquefort cheese, which I have never tried. It sounds totally interesting. And I have 4 traditional snails, which are done in garlic and parsley and butter, and I love the traditional snails. Now, Loïc, with the restaurant, very kindly told me that I should start with the curried ones because they're the gentlest, and then I should go on to the cheese, and I should finish with the garlic ones. So I'm going to take his advice and try one of these special snail tongs so I don't stab anybody with the snail. Okay. They're really good. And they come with toast, so you can sop up the extra butter because you don't want to waste the butter, you know. Oh, it's great. All it needs is a glass of wine. Because apparently you're always supposed to have white wine, slightly fruity, but not too sweet, with snails.
Of course, L'Escargot serves more than just snails. The restaurant offers a mix of classic French cuisine and modern gastronomy. The atmosphere is formal, but the staff is really friendly and helpful, and the wine cellar is outstanding. After the white wine, I tried a red Crozes Hermitage de Matinière, a Syrah from the Rhone Valley. At the Escargot, the meat is carved right in the middle of the restaurant on a special counter. The waiter is preparing duck à l'orange, a house specialty.
I love duck, and this looks wonderful. I guess this is the sauce for it, the duck gravy, okay? I can really understand why the famous actress Sarah Bernhardt loved this restaurant. She had meals delivered to her in her theater from here. And I totally understand. She actually donated the ceiling of her dining room when she died to this restaurant. And when you come into the restaurant, you see the ceiling of her dining room. And there's a portrait of this famous actress upstairs on your way to the washroom, actually. Don't miss it.
For dessert, I couldn't resist trying another French specialty, crêpe Suzette.
So we have the cognac for flavor, and to really round out the flavors of the orange juice and the butter and the crêpe. Then we have the Grand Marnier for a final little perfume of orange, because it's an orange liqueur. Okay, stand back. Fabulous.
Voilà,
Oh, merci.
les crêpes Suzette.
Merci, thank you so much. Okay. Suzette's. Oh, it's great. It's really great. It's really sweet and orangey and citrusy and really complicated.
This lovely crepe reminds me that I need to take you up the street to a famous royal bakery in Paris. Come see the place where Baba au rhum was first created right after this. We're in livable, edible Paris, exploring the city through its metro stations. Today, we're in the neighborhood around Metro Les Halles, in the heart of the French capital.
The Rue Montorgueil is one of my favorite places to come shopping to get fresh local ingredients. It's also a wonderful place to sit and have a glass of wine or a coffee and watch the world go by. But Montorgueil, Mount Pride, was actually ironically named because by the 16th century there was such a pile of garbage here and construction rubble from neighboring Les Halles that you could actually stand here and get a view of the city. Now, Montorgueil was the traditional seafood route into Les Halles, so places like Normandy and Brittany would send their oysters and fish here down this road. And even today, you can actually buy fish here on Montorgueil. It's a wonderful place to get all kinds of seafood. Now, I have to admit, the other thing I love to do while I'm here is get a pastry at Starrer.
Starrer is the oldest continuously operating pastry shop in Paris. It makes the most famous rum cake in the world because this is where the fabulous dessert was invented. In 1725, Louis XV married Marie Leczinska, the daughter of King Stanislaus of Poland. Queen Marie brought her pastry chef Nicolas Starrer with her when she arrived at Versailles. But the royal marriage was miserable, and within 5 years, Starrer had left the queen to open a private bakery at 15 Rue Montorgueil. This is where he invented the baba au rhum, a dessert that became a huge hit with aristocrats and still delights contemporary crowned heads. Even if you're not a fan of pastries, the shop is worth a visit. It's not only a historical monument for its facade, but also for its splendid interior. In 1860, artist Paul Baudry created this decor, and the pastry shop was so influential, Baudry went on to paint the walls of the Opéra Garnier. It's a suitably elegant location for making baba au rhum. The baba starts with simple ingredients: flour, yeast, salt, sugar, and eggs. This produces a dough which needs a little water and butter. The recipe is secret and there's no way to bribe the pastry chef. The dough is then put into molds and left to rest. Soon the baba are placed into the oven. Again, it's impossible to know the exact details, such as the cooking time or the temperature. The chef made it politely clear that the recipe is strictly secret. Once cooked, the baba are taken out of the oven and soaked in a mixture for which we were told a few of the ingredients. There's Madeira wine or Malaga, and I think I tasted a hint of saffron, but for the other ingredients, they remain a mystery. The baba are placed into the liquid just long enough to give them time to soak and become perfectly soft. Then a dose of good rum goes into each ramekin and the babas are glazed before being placed into the rum. There's also a more intense version of baba au rhum called Ali Baba, which is actually filled with pastry cream. For lovers of lavish desserts, this is really nirvana. But watch your liver, the dessert's awfully rich. Finally, the chef adds candied fruit and applies the famous label with the original Starrer signature on each baba. Voila, it's ready for the most demanding dessert lovers to enjoy.
I just bought one of the famous Starrer baba au rhums, and they come with their own spoon. And the pastry is soaked in sugar and rum. So the trick is to have a bite here without spilling the pastry all over Rue Montorgueil. It's great.
Les Halles offers so many stories along with all this great food. We'll visit a mysterious medieval tower right after this. We're in fascinating, radiant Paris, exploring the neighborhood around Metro Les Halles. These streets are steeped in history.
Here we are at Tour Jean Sans Peur, which was put up in 1408 by the Duke of Burgundy, who had good reason to fear because he had just helped to assassinate the king's brother. Jean was actually killed a little later on in front of the future King Charles VII. If you come here, we're standing between Rue Montorgueil and Rue Saint-Denis, just above Les Halles, and you can go inside the Tour Jean Sans Peur and see a beautiful turret staircase that's all carved, and gives you a really good feeling of how powerful the Duke of Burgundy was in the 1400s.
In the Middle Ages, murder was a fairly common practice to solve a problem, especially for the royal family and their entourage. You could just do it yourself or hire a competent assassin, but then watch your back. The Duke of Burgundy, Jean I, was called Jean Sans Peur, or Fearless Jean. He helped to assassinate the king's brother, but then proudly returned to Paris after a victorious military campaign. He justified his murderous behavior to the king, and he was forgiven. Jean had power and style. On his estate in Paris, he built a vast mansion, beside which he erected a monumental tower. This high structure had a symbolic value, signifying the power of its owner. The tower was only a little bit shorter than those belonging to royal palaces. Of course, it was a crime to surpass the king, a crime that could bring serious trouble. The medieval tower has a marvelous spiral staircase that leads up to the top of the turret. The carving is a masterpiece of flamboyant French sculpture featuring 3 plants, each representing a member of the family of Burgundy. There's oak for Philip the Bold, hawthorn for his wife Margaret of Maille, and hops for Jean Sans Peur himself. But the most surprising thing here are the latrines in 2 of the rooms. At a time when the Parisians used to throw their excrement into the street, this was an ultra-modern facility. It's a system of exhaust ducts throughout the walls that send everything into a pit located at the basement of the tower. The room was also equipped with water to wash up with, which was highly unusual for the Middle Ages, when the notion of hygiene was basically science fiction. Back then, doctors thought that dirt protected you against disease. Even if it looks like a fortified turret, the tower Jean Sans Peur actually had no defensive value. Its walls weren't thick enough to withstand cannon, and there were too many windows to really protect anyone inside. Yet the tower of Jean Sans Peur is the only part of the palace that has survived the ages. It's been restored repeatedly and hosts exhibitions about the life and customs of the Middle Ages. To wind down after exploring Les Halles, come back down the Rue Montorgueil to one of my favorite sidewalk cafes.
Ah, merci beaucoup. Merci. That's great. I really like Bourgogne Aligoté. I just ordered a glass of that. It's a nice, simple white wine, perfect for an apéro when I'm going to sit down and watch the street of Montorgueil go by. This shiny twilight hour when everyone's finishing up their shopping in Les Halles and rushing home. It's a particularly nice time to sit here. The great writer Balzac actually sets a scene in his novel La Comédie Humaine here in the restaurant Crochet de Cancale. Of course, the original one was higher up the street, and Balzac describes a cheap oyster bar with inexpensive white wine. And today's Crochet de Cancale is a more contemporary restaurant. But it's still lovely to sit here, have a glass of wine, and watch the human comedy go by.